John F. Kennedy, A Life of Courage and Change, read and published by Mr. Books. A Life of Courage and Change is a journey through one of the most iconic and transformative figures in modern American history. Born into privilege yet forged by adversity, John Fitzgerald Kennedy's life embodied the struggle for meaning, purpose, and progress in an era marked by turbulence and hope. As the 35th President of the United States, Kennedy stood at the crossroads of tradition and innovation, guiding a nation beset by Cold War paradigms, domestic strife, and the urgent quest for a better world. From the earliest days of his childhood, in the bustling, competitive milieu of the Kennedy clan, Jack was surrounded by expectations and by profound love tempered with steely ambition. Raised in a family where victory and resilience were woven into daily life, John's first lessons in courage did not come from the global stage, but from sickbeds and sibling rivalries, from the stories recounted at the dinner table, and from the persistent demands of a father who refused to accept defeat. These early trials, marked by frailty and perseverance, constructed a foundation upon which Kennedy would build the formidable character that inspired a generation. The narrative of Kennedy's ascent is both dazzling and deeply human. As a young naval officer courageously navigating the treacherous waters of World War II, he faced harrowing moments that nearly cost him his life, but ultimately earned him the enduring admiration of his peers. Entering the political landscape with a unique mixture of gravitas and relatability, Kennedy captivated audiences not just with his eloquence, but with a vision that dared Americans to look beyond the limitations of the present and into the bold possibilities of tomorrow. His presidency was a symphony of contrasts: hope and despair, idealism and political realism, private pain and public achievement. Through moments like the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy's leadership was tested under the world's most glaring spotlight, his every word and decision holding the fate of millions. Yet it was in his willingness to embrace change, whether by championing civil rights or daring to place an American on the moon, that Kennedy most indelibly altered the course of history. This book is not merely a chronicle of public events. It is a tribute to the spirit of courage and the enduring power of change. As we follow John F. Kennedy through the watershed moments of his life and legacy, we are invited to reflect on the meaning of leadership, the burden of expectation, and the relentless hope that drives humanity forward. In honoring the complexities, contradictions, and convictions of Kennedy's journey, we recognize in his story a mirror of our enduring quest for purpose and progress. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button to support the channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an audiobook that could change your life. Now let's begin. Enjoy. Chapter 1. The Seeds of Courage, Early Life and Family Legacy. John Fitzgerald Kennedy entered the world on May 29, 1917, in Brookline, Massachusetts, the second son of Joseph Patrick Kennedy and Rose Elizabeth Fitzgerald. From his earliest days, the environment that cradled him was one of vigorous ambition, intellectual curiosity, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. The Kennedy household, alive with the laughter and competition of 9 children, echoed with the high expectations of 2 parents who believed their children could and should leave an indelible mark on the world. Joseph Kennedy, a self-made millionaire and a prominent figure in business and politics, imbued his family with a sense of destiny that bordered on the prophetic. Failure was simply not an option. He demanded not just success, but distinction, urging his children to strive to take risks, and above all, to persevere in the face of adversity. Rose Kennedy, the daughter of Boston's mayor, was equally devoted to her children's upbringing, emphasizing the importance of faith, education, and a rigorous moral code. For young Jack, as John was affectionately known, childhood was both a blessing and a battleground. Suffering from frequent illnesses, scarlet fever, whooping cough, and unrelenting back problems, Jack was often confined to his bed, his body frail even as his mind sharpened. Books became his companions, history his refuge, heroes of the past his mentors. While his siblings played games in the yard or laughed at dinner, Jack read voraciously, nurturing a curiosity about the world that rivaled his father's ambition. These early brushings with mortality instilled in Jack a sense of life's fragility and the necessity of courage. Darkness and uncertainty shadowed his youth in other ways too. The Great Depression stalked the nation, and the rise of fascism in Europe threatened to engulf the world. Yet in the Kennedy household, hope persisted. Family debates raged around, the dinner table sharpening the children's wits and broadening their horizons. The brothers, Joe Jr., Jack, Robert, and Ted, were both collaborators and rivals, each seeking their father's elusive approval, each striving to outdo the other in academic, athletic, and eventually political achievements. Jack's schooling reflected the dualities of his upbringing, shuttling between the comforts of Choate, a prestigious boarding school, and the discomforts of his recurring ailments. He developed a tenacious work ethic paired with an irrepressible charm. Despite repeated absences, he excelled in subjects that captured his interest, particularly history and English, nurturing a growing sense that he was meant for something greater. The relentless drive for excellence was not without its costs. The Kennedy children lived under immense pressure, and for Jack, the shadow of his older brother, Joe Jr., the family's golden boy, was ever present. Joe Sr.'s expectations for Joe Jr. to one day become President of the United States were clear to all, including Jack. But as Jack watched his brother bear this burden, he learned not only about leadership, but about the responsibility that comes with it, the price of being born to change the world. World events, too, beckoned the young Kennedy to greatness. His studies at Harvard University placed him at the intellectual epicenter of his generation, where ideas about democracy, global conflict, and the meaning of service took on an urgent relevance. Jack's inquisitive nature led him to travel to Europe before World War II, witnessing firsthand the tensions that were soon to explode into chaos. The experiences would later shape his senior thesis, Why England Slept, an incisive examination of Britain's unpreparedness for war, an early indicator not just of Kennedy's analytical acumen, but also of his emerging worldview. Through hardships and privilege alike, John F. Kennedy's early life was sculpted by contrasts. Privilege offered opportunity, illness nurtured empathy, competition fostered drive, family expectation bred resilience. By the time Jack graduated from Harvard, he had already begun cultivating the seeds of a courage that would define not just his own life, but the aspirations of millions. In this crucible of family, illness, and history, the foundation for a remarkable journey was laid. A journey that would carry John F. Kennedy beyond the confines of mere inheritance, forging a life that, as we shall discover, was as much about transformation as it was about triumph. Chapter 2: Trials of Adversity, Illness, War, and Personal Fortitude. Physical suffering was a companion to John F. Kennedy long before he became a national figure. His body, ever a source of tribulation, shaped not just his childhood but every phase of his adult life. In the understated privacy of sick rooms, Kennedy waged wars just as significant as those he would later fight in the public sphere. His lifelong battle with illness, chronicled in Family Concern, doctors' warnings, and late-night prayers, was more than a footnote. It was a crucible of character, shaping his resolve and empathy. During his earliest years, Jack was plagued with a series of illnesses that would have weakened lesser spirits, Scarlet fever threatened his life at just 3 years old, a condition so severe that it caused waves of panic throughout the Kennedy family and required his mother's near-constant attendance. The ailments did not lessen as the years passed. Instead, his list of maladies grew, eventually including colitis, hepatitis, and the debilitating back injuries that would become a lifelong source of pain. Doctors at times doubted Jack's prospects. One physician even remarked that he might not see his 21st birthday. Rather than succumbing to despair, Jack used these brushes with death to develop an intimate relationship with his mortality. He emerged from each crisis with a heightened gratitude for life and a first-hand understanding of suffering, a quality that set him apart in the hothouse of privilege in which he grew up. But while the challenges within the Kennedy home were substantial, the world outside was descending into darkness. Jack's time at Harvard coincided with the rise of Nazi aggression in Europe. Driven by a sense of both curiosity and duty, he traveled across the continent, observing the political and social upheaval firsthand. His exposure to international politics was not merely academic, it was transformative. The precariousness of democracy, once an intellectual concept, became an urgent reality, shaping his sense of purpose. The true test of Kennedy's fortitude came with the outbreak of World War II. Eager to serve but physically frail, Jack struggled to gain acceptance into the armed forces. Initially rejected by both the Army and Navy for his chronic back problems, Kennedy refused to let disappointment define him. With characteristic ingenuity and determination, he petitioned family doctors and leveraged his father's connections, until, at last, he was allowed to serve in the Navy, an institution that would become both battlefield and crucible. Assigned as a lieutenant in the Pacific Theater, Kennedy was given command of Patrol Torpedo Boat 109, PT-109. It was a role that tested not just his leadership, but his very will to survive. In the darkness of August 2nd, 1943, a Japanese destroyer rammed the small American craft, splitting it in two and hurling Kennedy and his crew into the pitch-black oil-slicked waters. What followed was an ordeal that would be recounted in headlines and history books, but more importantly, seared itself onto Kennedy's character. Despite his excruciating injuries, his back re-injured, his energy dwindling, Kennedy led his men with extraordinary valor. He towed a wounded crewman through shark-infested waters by clenching the strap of his life jacket between his teeth, swimming for hours toward a remote island. For 6 days, he helped his men survive dehydration, exposure, and the terror of enemy patrols. His actions were not born of bravado, but of an unyielding sense of responsibility and empathy. For Kennedy, leadership was always a matter of caring more for others than for himself. The events of PT-109 became a national sensation after the war, casting Kennedy as a war hero. But the true legacy of those desperate days lay in the lessons he carried forward. Kennedy's wartime ordeal didn't just provide a compelling narrative for future political campaigns. It imparted a humility and perspective that would inform his every decision. "It was involuntary. They sank my boat," he later quipped, deflecting hero worship with humor that only barely masked the pain and lingering trauma of the experience. Returning from the war, Jack's health was precarious. He underwent a series of dangerous spinal surgeries and spent months convalescing, often on the verge between life and death. But his will, tested and tempered, refused surrender. Even as physical therapy and pain dominated his days, Kennedy's mind turned to service, this time through the political arena. The constant struggle against physical limitation taught Kennedy something fundamental about courage. It was not the absence of fear or pain, but the decision to act despite them. The stoicism he cultivated in sick rooms and on battlefields would serve him well in the tumultuous years ahead, as he confronted challenges on the stage of world history that would test every ounce of his endurance. Kennedy's trials of adversity rendered him uniquely equipped for the path he would soon travel. Through sickness and survival, through darkness and the unrelenting glare of expectation, Jack Kennedy emerged not merely as a man battered by fate, but as one steeled by it, prepared, in ways both visible and invisible, to inspire others to courage and change. Chapter 3: A New Frontier: Entry into the Political Arena. The close of World War II left the United States transformed, its old certainties shaken by the devastation and triumphs of war. For John F. Kennedy, who returned home as a decorated but war-weary sailor, the next step was uncertain. His trials had given him a new depth of empathy and purpose, but his physical scars were never far from the surface. Returning to civilian life, Jack faced fresh challenges, finding his vocation, healing his body, and deciding how best to serve a country he now understood in all its complexity. Politics called to him almost inevitably. After the tragic death of his elder brother, Joe Jr., in a wartime air mission, an event that devastated the family and shattered Joe Sr.'s lifelong ambitions, Jack found the attention of his father focusing sharply on him. The mantle of responsibility, once worn comfortably by his more robust brother, now fell to Jack, who accepted it with a quiet but resolute determination. In 1946, at just 29 years old, John F. Kennedy announced his candidacy for Massachusetts' 11th Congressional District. The campaign would be as much a test of personal fortitude as it was of political tact. Jack, still recovering from chronic pain, entered a bruising race against more seasoned political players. Yet, equipped with his family's substantial resources, the skills of an experienced campaign team, and his disarming charm, Kennedy quickly distinguished himself in the crowded field. He campaigned with energy, intelligence, and a rare ability to connect with ordinary people, whether union workers or war veterans, shopkeepers or students. Beneath the carefully tailored suits and Harvard-burnished credentials beat the heart of a man who understood adversity, whose soft Boston accent carried a wistful earnestness that cut through the cynicism of post-war politics. He listened carefully, memorized the names of voters, and appeared genuinely moved by the struggles he encountered. To many, he was not just a candidate, but a symbol of renewal, a living testament to the possibility of courage and change. Kennedy's platform blended progressive ideals with a practical understanding of the world. He advocated for affordable housing, improved pensions for veterans, and expanded economic opportunities. But his primary message was one of hope. America could and should do better. By November, his compelling presence and sharply focused campaign had swept him into Congress with a commanding majority. Congress, however, offered its own set of trials. The idealism Kennedy brought with him often clashed with the realities of bureaucracy and entrenched special interests. He was frequently in pain, rarely free from back braces or the prescriptions that eased his suffering. Long hours on the House floor took their toll, but Kennedy was determined to do more than simply occupy a seat. He wanted to make a difference. 1952, Kennedy set his sights on the United States Senate, mounting a campaign against the formidable Republican incumbent Henry Cabot Lodge, Jr. It was a race many considered unwinnable. Yet with a campaign that marshaled both the formidable Kennedy political machine and Jack's appeal, he triumphed, demonstrating not only his growing political acumen, but also the resonance of his message with a changing electorate. As a senator, Kennedy deepened his involvement in foreign affairs, drawing upon his wartime experiences and expansive worldview. He championed legislation supporting public housing and labor, investigated organized crime, and authored the Pulitzer Prize-winning Profiles in Courage, a study of political bravery that reflected his deep admiration for those willing to risk popularity for principle. In each episode, Kennedy's approach combined vision with practicality, always measuring the possible against the ideal. It was during these years that Kennedy met Jacqueline Bouvier, the elegant and intelligent young woman who would become his partner in both public life and private struggle. Their marriage in 1953 glittered on the covers of magazines, symbolizing a new American Camelot, but their journey, like Jack's, would prove a mixture of joy, loss, and perseverance. Kennedy's emergence in national politics was not without its critics. His youth, rapid ascent, and privileged background drew suspicion from opponents. Yet, Jack persisted, building alliances across the aisle, impressing colleagues with his incisive analysis and preternatural calm under pressure. His trials informed not just his empathy, but a political philosophy grounded in the belief that real change required both courage and compromise. By 1960, the prospect of a Kennedy presidency, once unthinkable for the Irish Catholic son of Boston, was no longer a fantasy. His combination of intellect, charm, and resilience, honed in wars both public and private, captured the imagination of a nation yearning for renewal. As the campaign for the White House loomed, Kennedy would set his sights on the greatest challenge yet, a new frontier, not just for himself, but for all Americans. Chapter 4. Shaping a Presidency: Ideals, Policies, and Dreams. John F. Kennedy's campaign for the presidency in 1960 was nothing short of revolutionary. At 43, he was the youngest man elected to the office and the first Roman Catholic. His candidacy radiated energy, hope, and the promise of a new frontier. Against the backdrop of Cold War anxieties, Kennedy's bold messaging resonated nationwide, inviting Americans to, in his words, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." Kennedy's vision for America was at once sweeping and specific. He advocated for civil rights, championed economic growth, and pledged to put a man on the moon before the decade's end. His inaugural address was a call to arms, summoning a generation to public service and global engagement. The Peace Corps, founded in 1961, stands as a testament to this idealism, a tangible mechanism for Americans, especially the young, to serve abroad and foster international goodwill. Yet governing proved more complex than campaigning. Kennedy inherited an America wrestling with the weight of the Soviet threat, a sputtering economy, and systemic inequality. His approach to policy was pragmatic, but guided by principle. He supported tax cuts to stimulate economic growth and fought to expand social programs, all while balancing the demands of fiscal responsibility. Kennedy's domestic agenda often collided with congressional opposition. His efforts to advance civil rights legislation met with fierce resistance, particularly from Southern Democrats. Despite setbacks, he laid vital groundwork, ordering federal agencies to end discrimination in hiring, sending federal troops to enforce university desegregation, and speaking out powerfully, as in his 1963 address. We are confronted primarily with a moral issue, as old as the scriptures and as clear as the American Constitution. In foreign affairs, Kennedy navigated a perilous landscape. He aimed to contain communism not just through military might, but with diplomacy and aid, initiating the Alliance for Progress with Latin America and supporting decolonization in Africa and Southeast Asia. His administration's policies blended realism with idealism, aspiring to combine national security with moral responsibility. Kennedy's presidency, though tragically brief, became synonymous with possibility. Through bold initiatives and ambitious rhetoric, he inspired a nation to look beyond its limitations. His dreams, of racial equality, technological achievement, and a more just world echoed far beyond the walls of the White House, shaping America's sense of its potential. Chapter 5. Confronting Crisis. The Cold War, Cuba, and the Brink. The Cold War defined the Kennedy era, and his presidency was punctuated by events that tested his leadership to the core. Barely 3 months after taking office, Kennedy faced his first major crisis, the Bay of Pigs invasion. The failed attempt by US-backed Cuban exiles to overthrow Fidel Castro was a humiliating blow. Critics savaged the administration, while adversaries eyed American weakness. Yet Kennedy responded with candor, accepting responsibility and learning hard lessons about the complexity of covert operations and the risks of unchecked advice. These lessons would prove vital in October 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. When American intelligence discovered Soviet nuclear missiles being installed in Cuba, the world stood on the precipice of nuclear war. For 13 harrowing days, Kennedy and his advisors weighed options: military strikes, invasions, and diplomacy. The president resisted intense pressure for immediate action, instead opting for a naval quarantine and secret negotiations with Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev. Kennedy's handling of the crisis remains a study in measured leadership. He blended firmness with restraint, refusing to be cornered by hawkish generals or intimidated by Soviet bluster. Diplomacy prevailed in the shadows. The USSR agreed to withdraw its missiles from Cuba, while the US quietly promised to remove missiles from Turkey. Catastrophe was averted not by force alone, but by courage, communication, and a willingness to seek a peaceful resolution. Other Cold War challenges persisted. The construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961 symbolized the division of East and West. Kennedy's famous speech in West Berlin, Ich bin ein Berliner, reaffirmed American support for the city, offering hope to citizens trapped by ideology and barbed wire. Freedom, he declared, is indivisible, and when one man is enslaved, all are not free. Kennedy's presidency navigated a volatile world without succumbing to fear or aggression. He increased aid to allies, advanced nuclear test ban, negotiations, and laid the groundwork for détente. Achieving peace was never easy or certain, but Kennedy's handling of the crisis, even in moments where mistakes were made, reflected a resolve to advance change, not simply react to danger. Chapter 6. The Torch Passed, Civil Rights and a Nation's Conscience. While foreign affairs often commanded headlines, the struggle for civil rights demanded Kennedy's moral attention and his leadership. From the start, the Kennedy administration confronted the nation's original sin, racial discrimination embedded in law and culture, North and South. Kennedy's campaign had won crucial black votes, but delivering on promises of justice proved daunting amid entrenched prejudice and political risk. Kennedy's approach to civil rights evolved. At first, ever the pragmatist, he sought gradual reforms, accelerating desegregation in federal agencies, promoting voting rights, and appointing African Americans to high office. But events on the ground demanded urgency. The Freedom Rides of 1961 challenged segregation in interstate travel. Violent resistance, including assaults on peaceful protesters, pushed Kennedy to deploy federal marshals and National Guard troops. The crisis at the University of Mississippi in 1962, where James Meredith's admission sparked riots, brought Kennedy face to face with the costs of progress. He addressed the nation, calling for not merely legal compliance, but heart and soul acceptance. Each encounter with violence and resistance sharpened his conviction that civil rights were a moral imperative. June 11, 1963, marked a turning point. In a nationally televised address, Kennedy declared the civil rights struggle a moral issue equal to any faced on the world stage. If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? He sent to Congress comprehensive civil rights legislation, knowing it risked alienating powerful allies and jeopardizing his ambitious domestic agenda. Kennedy did not live to see the Civil Rights Act passed. His assassination would turn that task over to his successor, Lyndon B. Johnson, but it was Kennedy's courage, his willingness to listen, to learn, and ultimately to lead that lent vital momentum to the movement. He learned, as did the nation, that real change required not just laws, but the willingness to confront injustice at its roots. Chapter 7. Shadows and Light, Personal Struggles and Triumphs in Office. The public image of John F. Kennedy, youthful, vigorous, confident, masked personal struggles hidden from all but his closest circle. The immense pressures of the presidency took a heavy toll on his health, with back pain and Addison's disease requiring a complex cocktail of medications. The very traits that drew Americans to him, his vitality, grace under pressure, and quick wit, were maintained through daily perseverance against physical discomfort and emotional stress. In the private sphere, Kennedy endured family hardships. The death of his infant son, Patrick, in 1963 devastated both him and Jacqueline, uniting them in grief beneath the public's gaze. At the same time, rumors and revelations about his private life, his infidelities and secret health battles surfaced, casting shadows over his shining public persona. Despite these private burdens, Kennedy's presidency saw moments of triumph. Beyond policy, his charisma and intellect reinvigorated the arts and sciences. He welcomed poets and Nobel laureates to the White House, advocated for cultural diplomacy, and supported projects that became American icons. Most famously, the Apollo program promising to send a man to the moon. Kennedy's humor was legendary. Whether diffusing tense cabinet meetings or delighting foreign dignitaries, he used wit as both shield and sword. At a press conference, pressed about his youth, he deadpanned, "I am the man who accompanied Jacqueline Kennedy to Paris, and I have enjoyed it." Such moments conveyed humanity amid the solemnities of state. Perhaps most enduring was Kennedy's capacity for hope. Even in the darkest moments after the Bay of Pigs, during the Berlin crisis, through personal sorrow, he never lost faith in America's power to change. His resilience inspired those who worked beside him and millions across the world. Chapter 8. Legacy Eternal, Assassination, Memory, and Enduring Change. November 22, 1963 dawned bright in Dallas, Texas. As Kennedy's motorcade wound through city streets, crowds waved and cheered. In an instant, the world changed. Shots rang out. The president slumped in his seat. The nation and the world entered a period of shock and mourning that would redefine contemporary history. Kennedy's assassination unleashed waves of grief, disbelief, and speculation. The image of Jacqueline Kennedy steadfast beside her husband's casket, the eternal flame flickering at Arlington National Cemetery, and the faces of two small children, Caroline and John Jr., became symbols of national loss. The tragedy obscured for a time the hopes and plans left unfinished. But Kennedy's legacy endured and grew. His vision of public service sparked generations to action. The Peace Corps flourished. Civil rights, championed in his name, became law. The moon landing he had willed into being was achieved within the decade. Kennedy's words, his boldness in the face of crisis, and his tireless advocacy for change continued to shape American politics and culture. Monuments bear his name, but Kennedy's true legacy lies in the spirit he kindled. He reminded America and the world that courage can coexist with vulnerability, that progress demands both idealism and pragmatism, and that even the briefest life can alter the arc of history. Today, the story of John F. Kennedy is not merely about a presidency cut short, but about the enduring power of leadership, hope, and the inexhaustible drive for change. In his legacy of courage and transformation, each generation finds new reason to dream, to serve, and to strive for a better tomorrow. If you found this video helpful, inspiring, or entertaining, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on future content. Your support means the world. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.